to order. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda?
Yep.
All right. Is there a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Thank you, Gretchen. Second.
Second.
Thanks, Glenn. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Agenda is approved. Lucille, were there any public comments via email?
I'm just gonna do one. No, not of as 5 minutes ago, but I'll do one more check since we
Okay.
just started. No comments.
All right. On to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Glenn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Ruth. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, consent agenda is approved. Reports. First one is board chair's report. I just wanted to once again say congratulations to the class of 2020 and commend the administration and the parents and in particular the student organizers who created a wonderful graduation, including perfect weather. And I think it was quite a joyous occasion. So we don't know perhaps if new traditions are being made, but I want to just congratulate the class again. It was fantastic. So thank you. I know that many of us were able to listen or have seen news alerts from this afternoon's governor's conference regarding school reopening. It's all completely new to everyone. We'll hear a little bit about it from the superintendent. And obviously we'll be discussing its contents in future meetings. Superintendent's report.
Great, just a few things. First, I'll join you in just congratulating all of our graduates. I'm really grateful for the work of Dr. O'Donnell and the graduation committee. I also wanted to just call out a few individuals. The students who organized, who serve as our WE TV. I don't know, as you were there, you saw miles of cable everywhere. The entire week setting up a command center up in the bridge. It looked like it was straight out of CNN studios. So I want to just recognize, I know there were others, but among them, Jake Arnowitz, Joe Eustace, Luke Schwartz, a couple of our graduates, Corey Sabia and Drew Gummins were also just put in an unbelievable amount of time to make sure that that piece of it worked, right from the pre-recorded speeches to the live simulcast. We also need to just say a quick thank you to some of our staff members who were there. Kathleen Kessler, who was Dr. O'Donnell's assistant, Kevin Slater, one of our high school teachers, also contributed just a tremendous number of hours to make sure everything was just the way we would want it. Also, Lucille always says yes and pitches in. So Lucille was there, Kim, Lori Getner, Erica Cross, Tracy DeAngelis, and then we had most of our building administrators also showed up just to help manage some of the logistics of the day. So I'm really grateful that people were able to attend and participate, and we're really especially grateful for the weather as well. So we'll see, kind of what the next round of traditions is. As you know, Debbie just mentioned, we received some initial state reopening guidance. I'll have an opportunity to just provide you a summary of that later on in the meeting. I also want to just note we are, as Andrea had reported over the last couple of meetings, we are planning to run a small in-person ESY program. So our health director, Barry Bogle, is doing his final review of our plan. We expect to have that feedback from him on Monday, but we'll have a small group of kids working out of the preschool at Miller Driscoll, and then another small group of kids in a couple of classrooms at the high school. And so it sounds like we'll have between students and staff about 50 total, and then the rest of the ESY services will be delivered remotely. I also wanted to alert the board. We've scheduled several follow-up events in support of our efforts to promote anti-racism and equity. In fact, right now as we speak, Michael Gordon is facilitating his second conversation with staff members on race and equity. And so we'll continue to hold those as the summer unfolds. We've also scheduled 2 student focus groups. Those are going to take place, the first on July 8th and then the second on July 15th. We're hoping to have group sizes of about 20. Michael was reaching out to some students just to get a sense of what time of day would work best for them. So once we get that feedback, we'll finalize the time. And then if we need to schedule additional, we'll certainly be willing to do that. And we'll continue that conversation. Those are my updates.
Thank you. And also please send our thanks to Michael Gordon for organizing the conversations and the focus groups. All right, committee reports.
Business ops has not met.
Nope.
Okay.
Teaching and learning is not met.
And
Policy
policy.
has not met.
Okay. Financial report. Hi, Ann.
Yep, sorry, I was unmuting myself.
No, that's okay. I just said hi.
Hi. In regards, as you know, from the budget hearings that we went through, we had laid out a plan in regards to up to 800,000 of technology needs, which has gone, those purchases have gone right ahead and they're coming in right now. And we also had 377,000 of encumbrances. So we were estimating about 1.7 in savings. We're still on that estimation right now, but we still have, additional bills and things coming in. So what I wanted to point out, a couple of different things, was in looking at the financial report, you'll see that there's various balances you'll see various accounts or categories that have negative balances. That's because we're going ahead to, technology looks like it's over budget right now, approximately 700,000 or 800,000. It's because we're getting the spending in so we don't hold up the process, so we don't lose the opportunity to make sure we get those Chromebooks in place. And once everything is has been expended and put into place, I'll do the budget transfers from the lines we have savings to the lines that were over budget because we know the savings are in the budget. So we're watching that very closely, but I want to just assure that yes, they're negative, but it's only because we haven't transferred the savings where they were coming from other accounts. Another item that might be confusing is in relation to the year-to-date encumbrance number that we have. It's on the very last page, about $2.5 million. And based on the budget meetings that we just had, between 800,000 and 377, we had 1.2 that the board had approved for us to spend and encumber. Currently, it's at 2.5. That difference is because we still have ongoing expenditures, utilities, some tuition, some school transportation, things like that. They're ongoing bills that are still coming in that have been taken into consideration when we did the estimates, but that number will significantly reduce as we start clearing up all the year-end bills as they come in. So I wanted to make sure with that as well, because that might have been a confusing point. So right now we're on track. We're trying to get all the invoices in, and we have within the next month, 6 weeks, we have to get everything final so that one, we know what our ending numbers are and we're in balance to what we expected. And two, we have to do the what's called an ESF filing up at the state. So that's due by the end of beginning of September. So we have to make sure we get that in place as well. That is required, and there's penalties to that without getting it filed on time. So I would open it up for questions from people.
Yeah, and a question about the tuition for outplacement. We're way over there. And I would have thought that two things. Genesis would have had a positive impact on that. Secondly, that most of those schools closed as we did, and those students came home. So I'm concerned about how we're $1.4 million over and that line item. I don't see Andrea, so she's probably not on tonight. But can we? Well,
you have to. Sorry.
So it's just I'm confused about that. I would have thought those two things would have positively impacted our outplacement expense, and yet we're $1.4 million over. I don't get it.
Barring any contractual ones that we still would have had to pay, we still had sped expenditures throughout the whole year through March.
Yeah.
And if you remember, we're not from a education cost sharing, I'm sorry, excess cost. From the excess cost, we're not allowed budget those numbers. So
Right.
we will go over budget for the amount that we've expended. And you'll see I put underneath 1.4 million. That's our excess costs coming back to us. So
Nice.
we've provided to the state that level of actual expenditures
Okay.
that we're getting the refunds, a refund, we're getting that grant back on.
So are you saying that we had to pay for students even though the schools were closed and the students weren't there?
I would have to just confer with Andrea on that because I don't know if there was any contractual ones that would hold it. I don't know if there's any obligations like we had with transportation and
Right. Yeah.
some other items.
Right.
I don't have that level of detail with me. I'd have to confer with Andrea on that.
Okay. Well, it's just a question because I know that most of the schools closed as we did and all the students came back home. So I don't know why we would have paid. I would have thought there would have been more savings in that area. That's all. Okay.
The students that were outplaced received services even remotely from those schools. So when you say they came back home, it's not as though they get services, and we were then responsible for educating those kids.
Yeah.
So that is.
Thank you, Kevin.
Expenses there. To your earlier point about Genesis, I would just point out to you, Genesis absolutely has had a positive material impact on the budget. And you see it actually in the 2021 budget with the reductions in transportation as well as in sped tuition.
No, okay, fine. It's just it's a big number, and it's our largest number that we missed by. I'm just concerned about that. And a question for Eric. I'm assuming that our commitment to get our purchases in has not met with any problems in terms of suppliers being able to fulfill our purchases and get equipment and items to us. Is that correct? Are we okay?
We're doing very well. We've received all of the Chromebooks arrived on Friday.
Okay.
Work chargers, so those are delayed about a month.
Okay.
And then laptops look to be arriving in early August right now. We don't have a finally shipment date, but
yeah,
we're looking good right now.
Good, because you had expressed some potential concern about that if we didn't make our commitments. And that's good news then. Okay, thank you.
Just one question about reimbursement for any of the emergency costs. Is that a work in progress? Is there a timeline for that?
It is a work in progress. There's two different parts. We have to file with FEMA first, which we're currently doing. FEMA, when it's approved, will pay us back at 75% of approved expenditures. Then we turn that around and we get letters from FEMA to say what they covered, what they're not covering. We then turn to the state. And from the Board of Education, we have to go through, there's $110 million that we would go through on the Board of Education side first. And whatever is not covered there, then we have to move to the general state grant that they have out there for $75 million. So there's a process we have to go through and different avenues to be able to get it covered.
So will we be eligible then for state and or federal, some of the grants aside from the reimbursement?
Well, it's all reimbursement. I'm sorry if I'm saying the wrong thing. It is all reimbursement. What I'm trying to find out on the state side is any of the executive orders that required us to pay for things like the bus contract, can we get reimbursement on that because we were required to keep it? So there's a couple of questions out there just trying to get finalized through the state. FEMA won't cover that because that's a state directive. So I'm not putting that forward, but everything else is getting put forward to FEMA in that way. And we do it in quarters. The state has set it up with FEMA that we apply for it on quarterly. So in July, when I bring technically the first quarter together, I'll give that all to FEMA. They'll turn that around within they said about a 3-week time frame, which then gives me the ability to turn around to try and hit the deadlines on the state. The state also said they know the timeline of FEMA and their deadline may go out further to accommodate to make sure that we get what we need before we have to turn around to the state and not miss their deadlines.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions or comments on the financial report? All right. Thank you, Anne. And
Thank you.
Thanks for doing such a good job of projecting the year-end balance, which looks pretty much right on our target. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a follow-up survey to hear about. So Kevin, I don't know who, I see Kim on, but I
Yes.
think you might want to introduce it.
Yes, so we re-administered a survey to our parents in June. We also administered at the same time a survey to our staff, and probably a week or two prior to that had administered a separate survey to our secondary students. So Kim and Maria are going to tag team this agenda item and just provide a high-level overview of the feedback that we received. And I would just share with the board that, you know, we've looked at the feedback, we continue to look at the feedback, and we're using that to shape our reentry plans. So go ahead, take it away, Maria and Kim.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. We are pleased to present on the progress of the Wellness Return to School Planning Committee. As you all know, we do have a committee, and our goal is to develop a plan to promote the wellness of students, teachers, and parents, and also a plan for reaching out and supporting students and families in need as we return to school, whether it's on site for the entire year, and we hope that that's the case, or whether we have other disruptions in the upcoming school year. The committee is comprised of teachers and mental health professionals from each building, with a plan to expand our membership in July to include community health professionals, parents, and students. We've been meeting weekly to develop and begin implementing our action plan. And our action plan includes a needs assessment and surveys for constituent groups like staff, students, and parents. And so we're happy to report that we've already begun executing our plan. As Kevin mentioned, we administered 3 surveys one to each of those groups earlier this month. And I'm going to report out on the staff survey just to give you the highlights, the themes of what we asked about. We wanted to know what went well for staff during e-learning, what needs people have for the upcoming school year, particularly if we have similar closures or disruptions, what barriers staff foresee, and how we might address them. Tonight, I'm going to be reporting out specifically on teachers. We had 445 respondents, which is actually excellent because we have just about 600 staff members. Of the 445, 325 were teachers. And so I'm sharing out on their responses. However, I will say that the responses of the other groups were very similar to these results. First, just to start with everyone's experience with e-learning, we were pleased to actually see that more than 90% of our teachers reported that they fared either okay or very well in the e-learning environment. So it went okay, well, or very well. And over 90% responded in that range, with 62% in the well or very well range. 74% responded that they did more work in the e-learning environment, things like preparing things to post, screencastifying, responding to emails, working individually with students. All of those things they reported did take longer than typical preparations for on-site instruction. And if they experienced difficulty with the environment, the recommendations for improvement were to have a more consistent schedule. We did modify the schedule a number of times. I think the fluid process required that, and we were trying to be very responsive to the needs of our kids and families and teachers. But there was a bit of change throughout the period of closure. Technology is something that they believe we can continue to improve, although they did note that technology is something that worked very well. Some of the short answer responses reflected technology in their own homes that wasn't always working well. I know I've experienced that personally where Wi-Fi wasn't working. Clear expectations for students and staff. We adjusted throughout and we made some changes in what our expectations were relative to whether things were optional or mandatory. And some of the teachers reported that it would be helpful to have a very clear and consistent approach for whether things are going to be mandatory for students. And curriculum came up at one school, thinking about what shifts we're going to have to make in curriculum if we're in a closure setting again. Obviously, teaching remotely is different from teaching on site. The vast majority thought that communication from both school and the district were about right. In thinking about planning ahead, we wanted to ask questions about people's availability. You know, some of the challenges that people reported during this school closure period was that they had their own children at home and it was difficult to manage both their own children and then teaching. So we asked some questions about that. A third of our respondents have school-aged children who need their intervention should we have another closure. 78 people expressed interest in on-site childcare. So we are really interested in looking at a wide range of things to support staff and families. And while we haven't made any commitments to something like on-site childcare, it is something that we wanted to explore to see if there was interest. And we learned through that process that 78 people were interested, and that would mean 150 plus children would take advantage of that if we were to offer it. Teachers felt that they were well equipped for identifying and supporting mental health issues for students. Should we, you know, have to, obviously we're going to need to address that coming back regardless of what the setting is. And we were happy to see that. Although I think with that said, even though teachers are feeling good about it, it's something that we would certainly want to be sure that we're providing adequate professional learning in, just to ensure that everyone is well prepared and feeling very comfortable to address those needs. Things that went well, teachers noted that collaboration went extremely well. Many people highlighted the work of the coaches and the Library Learning Center staff members. They also thought that technology went very well. So whereas it was a challenge in some cases, it was also a strength for us. And the fact that so many students you know, were able to get technology right away. Staff members had a lot of good technology support. And so that was a success. And then needs for next year, clear expectations for what the environment is going to be like, consistent scheduling, continued professional learning, and continued collaboration. So I'll take any questions that you have about that, and then we'll transition to Kim, who's going to present on the parent and student surveys.
Okay.
Any questions or comments?
I would love to, Maria, if over the next week or two, you could just share perhaps like a written breakdown of the questions and responses, like the percentage wise, just to be able to go back and kind of review it at my own pace. But I think kudos on the report and the findings, and that would be great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess
maybe a few slides for what you just presented, so we can remember the numbers.
Oh,
well, you know, can I ask, because we did get we did get all the slides for all the surveys
Right.
in an email. Can we get hard copies of those? I just that we can look at it at our leisure without
It's hard, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
I think the color, yeah, and you know, I even printed out my own sets.
Yeah.
So is what you're looking for the hard copies? Because we do have it reported out by school, which we thought would be helpful to you.
Whatever you have that
Okay.
came in the email, if we can get hard copies made
Sure.
and mailed to us, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Of
Happy to
each
do
of the
that.
surveys, both the teachers, parents, and the students. It would be great to be able to sit down with them in hand and as Ruth says, to look at them at our leisure and study without having to try and do it on the computer, because it's just not. Well, I won't say it isn't my cup of tea.
I think we could all do with a little less screen time these days. So happy to send hard copies.
So if you could, that'd be great, and just and mail them to us even.
Sure.
That would be a good thing to have in front of us that we just sit at our leisure and look at and try and study and get some. And Ruth is exactly right. But I went through them all in the email. Each and every one of them was like, oh, okay, all right, okay, fine. But then going back and forth and trying to,
Great. Happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good idea.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Maria, can I ask you a quick question? Have you guys reached out to teachers yet to see who may or may not be able to come back in the fall?
We haven't done that formally because, you know, it's the plan had been changing really right up until today. So we certainly have plans as we get closer to the school year to learn more about anyone that may have restrictions. But we feel like we have a lot more people coming back now that we know that it's likely that everyone's going to be on site. You know, earlier, the concern was that people whose school-age children might have closures in their home districts might then not be available. That was a big concern. It's looking like the state is taking a consistent approach, and we'll hear, I think, a little bit more about that in a little while from the superintendent. But we do have plans to do that, and you know, we're hopeful that that number has gotten much smaller now that we have a more consistent plan statewide.
Yeah, Jen, that's a really good question. We also, we need to go back and survey families too and try to get as much clarity as possible about, you know, who's actually going to be in person with us.
Okay, I think I'm up if there's no more questions.
Okay. Hi, Kim.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So I'm going to report out on the parent survey and the secondary student survey. So we did a second parent end of the year survey. This was developed in-house. It was modeled after the April version, which asked questions around the parent and child's experience with e-learning. And then we asked for improvements since the survey in April. We asked questions around communication, students' social emotional well-being, and if students were having difficulty with engagement, what did parents see as the barriers and recommendations that they may have. We had a great response rate. Over 1,300 parents responded to this survey. Wow. And we had equal representation really from all 4 schools.
Wow.
Yeah, that was great. So 75% of the parents reported that their children were managing the e-learning environment on a scale from not well at all to very well. So the 75% were okay, well, or very well. And then 76% of parents reported that they managed okay to very well supporting their children. For those who the e-learning was not going well, we asked for recommendations on specific steps that would help to support parents. And some of the themes were more synchronous sessions, more concise plans, clear expectations, more instruction, and apparent access to Google. And you'll see themes from what you know, the students say to what validation of what the parents say as I go through kind of the highlights. And then also those who were unable to engage for whatever reason, we asked parents to kind of identify what they saw as the barriers. And focus was a big barrier, and you'll see that reported out in the student survey. Engagement, interaction, instruction, not enough feedback, the structure and the schedule. You'll see students report that as a positive and then also a negative. So half the kids like it, half the kids don't. The lack of live synchronous sessions was also reported as a barrier. And then at the secondary level, they noted an overload of the work. And again, the students will validate that when I go over that in a later survey. Top areas for improvement identified since the changes were implemented in our first survey in April were really communication, flexibility, consistency, schedules, and synchronous learning. The vast majority of parents thought the communication from both the school and the district level was about right. The question around social emotional, it's not surprising. Parents are more concerned around their child's social emotional well-being in the end of the year survey than they were in April. And really, some of the feedback was around the children's social isolation being really an area of significant concern. And then we asked for recommendations as we look ahead in the future. And so parents, the top areas were, again, more synchronous learning and making that mandatory at the high school level, small group or direct instruction, more feedback, and then consistency and organization. And then we surveyed students at the secondary level in grades 6 through 12. This survey was not in-house. This was developed by Authentic Connections, and it was a specific survey for COVID-19. We had over 1,400 respondents in this survey as well, and we had comparable data. there was about 8,000 students that took this survey nationwide. And this survey really looked at the well-being index and students' experience with distance learning. The well-being index, we have good news to celebrate. Our depression scales were significantly lower than national norms, and our anxiety level, although elevated, it was still lower than national norms as well. When we look at these scales by grade level, however, our 11th grade class did show clinically significant levels of anxiety. So that is an area, a student group that we would want to focus on. The top 3 predictors in relation to the symptom scales were low parent relationship quality, high distraction, and a low ability to learn at home. When we look at the top areas that students reported as positive, that was structure and schedule, faculty academic support, and in overall communication and support from faculty. The top areas of concerns, this is in the quantitative data that I'm reporting out on, was assignment volume, which again, when we looked at comparable data, that was #1 for students in, across the survey. So this wasn't a phenomenon to Wilton. Faculty academic support and structure and schedule was on the concern side too. And again, they say that's not uncommon, that half the kids, will report something being positive and the other half that it's a concern. When we looked at the free response questions, what's nice about having, a survey that's normed and, they compile the free response data and it's coded into 23 categories. So we can really look at the qualitative data in a way that makes sense for us. What was great to celebrate, what kids reported was going well, was the adults checking in with them, whether that was counselors or teachers, but that really was a theme that came through. Again, the schedules and teachers asking for feedback. Just the idea of students being surveyed was a really impactful thing to do, and that students more want to be asked more often about feedback. Students' greatest concerns were around COVID-19 and the impact that that's having on their family members' health or potentially their own. Assignments, keeping up with work and keeping their grades up, and then future concerns, uncertainty about fall or what will happen in college. And then areas of improvement, less volume and workload, grading and due dates, clarity around that, and more teacher contact. So then again, what was nice is they'll take the quantitative data and the qualitative data and triangulate it and come up with areas to focus on and priorities. And so these areas were for us to really kind of look at is coordinate the assignment volume and schedule, encourage student voice if they're feeling overwhelmed to let people know, and increase teacher communication about the workload. The second area was making sure to build in breaks and ways for kids to de-stress. This is especially important because our kids aren't involved in sports or physical activity during the shutdown or even fun events. So really, paying attention to wellness. The third area was to address the preoccupation with health concerns. And so we should be offering SEL group check-ins for students so they can share those concerns and normalize peer-to-peer that, this is okay. And then the fourth area was to limit lectures and have more time for discussion to increase engagement, and offer a variety of ways of reminding students because they're easily distracted in the e-learning environment and may need multiple reminders and ways to kind of manage their workload. And that's all. Are there any questions?
Kim, your comment earlier about the juniors, 11th grade, being the one with the greatest anxiety level. Mm-hmm. Do you think that has any, and they're going now into their senior year. Mm-hmm. Was that the driver, not knowing what their senior year is going to be like, and what I would assume that that's their concern, having seen what happened to this year's senior class. That's really what's driving that, but maybe it's something different. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we could speculate. A junior year is a big year. a lot of pressure to begin with. You know, in the students, that class reported a higher level of parent pressure as well, which is kind of a symptom indicator. So, you know, and as we are looking at ways to support that class moving into the senior year and post-secondary. So,
all right, good. You've got the whole college application process
Yeah.
going on,
Yeah.
and and the uncertainty around that now.
Yeah.
So they need some attention. They need some CLC.
they do, and there's a committee that's already formed that's looking specifically at that group.
Yeah, that's great. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for that.
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Was there anything in the survey, Kim, that was surprising to you?
You know, I was surprised to see how well we're doing on the well-being index. You know, I was suspecting higher rates of anxiety, so I was pleased to see that. And I think it's great that, you know, we work really hard at connecting to students and reaching out, and to see that, you know, the students acknowledged it. That's great. So.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, I think overall, I think a lot of the things that our staffs did at the school level, at whatever, were just phenomenal. You know, their attempts at making personal contact with kids. I mean, it really was a remarkable effort. I think all of our staff, all of our teachers did above and beyond to do everything they could to maintain contact and the relationships. It was a remarkable thing to see throughout the whole time, the whole period.
Absolutely. And I think the parent community too, in supporting, you know, becoming teachers at home, like who was prepared for that. So it's a good community effort.
Yeah. I think Louise had said she was talking to a couple of parents, and one of them said, "Have you gotten your teacher assignment for next year?" And the other mother said, "Oh my God, I hope it's not me." You know? And, so anyway.
Yeah. I know that we heard from parent voices and maybe some student voices as well early on about wanting more synchronous learning, and it seemed that was picked up. Was it like overwhelming, or was it like, okay, you know, a little bit more would do it, or was it sort of a hue and cry?
You know, I think it came out in the survey that we improved in that area, and parents are looking for more.
Students too.
Yeah, and students too, exactly. Yeah, more of that connection. Yeah, more FaceTime.
And Kevin, do you think teachers are looking for that as well?
You know, I think when I talk to teachers, this experience, I mean, it's hard on everyone, but, you know, just about every teacher I've talked to, and I've talked to, you know, many of our staff at this point, the thing that was challenging for them was the lack of interpersonal connection with students, right? That's the reason they get into this work, and, you know, the dimension of the work that animates them every day. And so that was hardest. So what our teachers want is to be in school with their students. Say, in fairness, students want the same.
Yeah. I had a teacher tell me, I never signed up to be a teacher so that I could teach to a class virtually, and that really resonated with me when she said that.
Yeah,
right.
This was, I think, you know, we've learned a lot of lessons, and you know, I think it's important to recognize and celebrate the accomplishments. But, you know, as we're looking forward, and we're going to talk about here next, you know we can do things differently. We've been planning that way for more than a month at this point. And, you know, to the best extent possible, we're going to try to, you know, create those connections, foster those connections, and deliver instruction in the way it's meant to be done.
I mean, as a mom with kids at home, days where they had interaction with their teachers on a smaller scale instead of a full classroom experience, just even it, and sometimes it was just for 10 minutes, the whole flow of the day was better and changed, because they had that kind of interaction, that connectivity, and they kind of then also had a level of like accountability that was coming from someone other than mom. So it changed, the whole dynamic changed. And it didn't even have to be kind of full on instruction, even if it was just like a 2 or 3 kids teacher check-in, whatever it was. I know it was amazing how something so small made such a big difference.
Any other questions, comments on this? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move on to the agenda item. I think Debbie's having some Wi-Fi issues, so.
Yeah, I think she's frozen.
Yeah, all right. Okay, so we're gonna, why don't we go ahead and if there are no more questions or comments on this topic, we'll go ahead and move forward. At 4 o'clock today, I received the slides that accompany the governor and the commissioner's plan for reentry. So I'm going to share my screen and just, we'll spend, 5 or 8 minutes just walking through those slides, because I think they capture, while they're not heavily detailed, they do capture some of the big ideas, and there's certainly quite a bit to talk about here. So, sorry, I'm always just trying to get my screens together. So when we spoke with the commissioner earlier today, he made the point of noting very plainly that, in addition to being in the middle of a global health pandemic, we're also experiencing an education emergency. And so in response to that, State Department of Ed organized some task forces, surveyed lots and lots of folks, and learned some things. And so the consistent pieces of the feedback that they received were that, we need to really pay attention to students' social and emotional health and well-being. I would say staff as well. We've all experienced, this shutdown. And so we're going to need to prepare for, whether it's trauma or, other kids just needing some additional support. That's a significant factor, and the state got lots of feedback about that. The state also heard feedback that, kids love their schools, they're safe places. And as time went on, across the state, people really missed the continuity and the structure that comes along with being in school. So that was some of the feedback they got. Guiding this plan, I think very heavily is the current data we have on the transmission of COVID-19 and current infection rates. And we know that over the last month or so, comparatively speaking, Connecticut has done and is doing very, very well. We continue to see declines in hospitalization rates. We haven't seen the kind of resurgence that other states are currently experiencing. And so I think that body of data really figured very largely in the state's plan. So moving on, they also identified some guiding principles. I think it goes without saying that, protecting health and safety is foremost. Creating an opportunity for all students to come back and start learning again in school is important. And then continuing to actively monitor community spread of COVID-19, across the community, within the school, among students and staff, and then responding appropriately was one of the guiding principles here with this plan. The state emphasizes equity and access as we're moving out of hopefully moving out of this pandemic, continuing to promote communication, and then paying attention to both the physical safety, social emotional well-being, and the mental health needs of our students when they're not in school. And so, I took that to mean, in addition to planning for a return, we also need to have a plan in place for shutdowns should there be a resurgence within the community or across the state. And so the big news is here on this slide, and that's, that all districts should plan for reopening in the fall with an in-school return for all students every day. And that was really the headline here of the reopening guidance. What the commissioner talked about in kind of achieving that was paying attention to mitigation strategies. And so I'll call your attention to a couple of things here. What I think, I personally paid a lot of attention to and was trying to ferret out was this understanding of maximizing social distancing. So in the conversation with the commissioner today, they're not talking about consistently maintaining 6 feet of social distancing. And that makes sense because we have been communicating to the commissioner all along that you can't have every kid back in our facility and maintain 6 feet of social distancing if you're going to educate that number of kids simultaneously. And that was the message, from just about every school district in the state. So what they're proposing is that while we bring all students back, we need to maximize social distancing. So as we get into our deeper into our planning now over the course of the next month, we're going to have to define for ourselves what it is that we can and should be doing to maximize social distancing. The other mitigation strategies that were emphasized today were that frequent hand washing, continued use of hand sanitizer. There is going to be a requirement for face coverings that cover the mouth and the nose for all students and staff who are able to wear them. And then enhanced cleaning and disinfecting routines to make sure that our spaces are clean. It was also, and I think everybody understands this. This is kind of the first best hope is that we'll be able to accomplish this, but this is all dependent on the continued data trend with respect to COVID-19 and spread within our community. Some other guidelines and recommendations that they offered. The commissioner spoke about this idea of cohorting as a mitigation strategy. And so, to put it plainly, you take, a class of kids and to the best extent possible, you keep them together throughout the school day and prevent them from mixing with other groups of kids. If you have elementary age kids or you've been in an elementary school, you can pretty easily understand that that's probably more achievable at an elementary school. I think achievable with many respects at a middle school because you can keep kids in classrooms and rotate teachers in and out. It becomes far more challenging at the high school level when you have kids taking so many different classes and teachers teaching so many different types of classes. But they were strongly recommending and encouraging, though not requiring, cohorting. And then, I think this was also just a challenge for me as I was listening to the explanation this morning. So while we're proposing to maximize social distancing, given certain conditions, the commissioner also stated that, we should plan to, bus as many kids as possible. And so they were very short on details around managing social distancing on buses, given the buses we have. So I'm expecting when we get more detailed guidance on Monday that there'll be quite a bit more detail and explanation. And you can see, just a simple kind of summary here of, based on conditions within a community, those should drive some of our decisions, both in terms of, how we transport kids and how many, as well as how many kids we can have back in school if, we have some kind of resurgence and we can't have every kid back. So those are, I think, the big ideas. It, should also, goes without saying, as I said, the State Department of Education, the governor, I think the Department of Health all feel very good about the current health data trends. In addition to planning for a reopening, we obviously need to be developing alternative plans as well. And so as part of that, we know that we're going to have some students and some staff members who, because of their own, kind of medical conditions, can't be in session in person. So we need to have a structure in place to provide the same kind of high quality education for students who have to be home because they can't be in school. That's where, when we continue to develop our or update our plans on the use of Schoology's, our learning management system, I think we're taking a very positive, proactive step in setting ourselves up to be able to support those kids at home and also manage a more fluid transition if we have to have a wide scale shutdown. And so you can see that last bullet there is that a lot of the decision making will be determined by the rate of community spread. And I think we'll need to work here locally with our health director to really ferret out, what exactly that means, what those indicators are, how routinely, we're able to monitor them. And we'll go from there. So that was the governor and the commissioner's plan. And I'll just say, based on what I heard today and then the press conference, I'm very anxious to hear and to see the detailed document that's supposed to be published Monday, because I have a very, very long list of questions. But our plan internally is to, we'll take that guidance once we get it. We're going to take the next week to read it. And then when the district reopens on July 6th, our leadership team will be gathering to really dive into that and start to put, clear plans together. And then we'll be in a position, that week or the following week to provide much more substantive updates to the board and the community about, what this reentry for all is going to look like here in the Wilton Public Schools.
Okay, I think the public got to hear that at 4 p.m. So some of us were able to listen. I think your advice is good about we all have questions, but this is so new and so much unknown that it really, I don't want to drive ourselves crazy with lots of questions tonight. I'd prefer to wait until we see the guidance from the state on Monday. And I think even so, then we'll probably still have lots of questions left. My main takeaway is that it's based on a very optimistic assumption about Connecticut data, that it's going to stay positive and get even better. So let's hope for that. But there may be some more contingencies that happen between now and then. So anyway, it's certainly more optimistic and more positive than I was expecting, to be honest. But I apologize.
Yep. Your Wi-Fi is just, it's
We can't hear you, Deb.
5%.
All right, Kevin, you're gonna have to take over because it just doesn't like me tonight.
Sure.
Kevin, the only question I have is just if you could make a statement.
So,
I have
it's all yours, Kevin.
I've had so many emails about people being like, I'm going to start a letter writing campaign because I heard a rumor about Wilton doing this. Can you just state and say that we really have no plan as to this? We have ideas, but there is nothing concrete.
No.
Rumor mill is el fuego, on fire. So.
Right. So here's what I would say, Mandy, and just for the benefit of everybody here and anyone who might be listening, beginning tomorrow, we're going to send out a Friday update. It'll be in the kind of news from the schools format, and we'll provide lots of different information. And then we'll continue those publications throughout the summer on Fridays just to keep parents abreast of what we're doing. But to your question, as you well know, we have been thinking about reentry for more than a month now. We created 9 separate committees to explore and plan for various facets of that. The committee that I'm chairing really is focused singularly on some of the health and safety concerns that we've been Chuck is leading some of the curriculum committees. Maria is leading the wellness committees and the personnel committee. And then Bob O'Donnell is chairing the committee that's focused on our rising seniors. So those committees are planning, and there is no comprehensive reopening reentry plan at this point. We have to submit, part of what the commissioner reported today is that all districts will be required to and to the provide a plan to the State Department of Ed by I think it's July 24th. And so prior to that, we will have a Board of Education meeting in which we'll review this plan. And, my hope would be to have our board vote to, and, that'll be probably the first time we see a comprehensive plan. And so what I would say to, everybody, people need to sit tight for a little bit. You know, the best news we got today was that, and you know, I think to Debbie's point about it being optimistic, our goal is going to be to put a plan together that enables all of our kids to come back every single day. That is not a small feat when you're thinking about how you manage students, and especially little ones, with masks and have to maintain some kind of social distancing. But you know, we have the staff to get that done and get it done well. So, and then we'll also have follow-on plans to moderate based on, you know, kind of how this COVID disease progresses here in our community.
Yeah. Kevin, Heather just sent out an email, you know, I guess right between our prior meeting and this meeting, about your conversation with her that talks about this. So hopefully people will be getting that message in your comments with her. And it was a special thing from Good Morning Wilson that just came out.
Yeah, right before the meeting. And
yeah.
You know, my comments to her were just, you know, we're on one hand, you know, delighted to have the opportunity to try to bring all of our kids back.
Right.
You know, the task is daunting.
Yeah. So the details are scheduled to be released more on Monday. Is that the Monday is the date? Because they said next week, but I wasn't sure. So Monday is the day that we're supposed to be getting more detailed information.
Detailed plan on Monday, correct?
Okay.
And first point, I'll pass it on to all of you, so
okay,
read it as well.
All right, good. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I apologize. When I went off, I also swore, so I definitely apologize for that.
We didn't hear you, don't worry. Okay.
Well,
oh, you're gone again.
Yeah, we lost you.
For the board to hear. There's a CABE call tomorrow, and I can send the board members that link if you would like to hear more about that.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. So,
right. All right, I tried to switch to the hotspot. I'm not sure it's doing much better. So, Kevin, did you want to add anything more on the reopening sort of new news?
In terms of, you know, as I was sharing before, you know, we will, you know, continue to communicate out to our community. We will schedule, as we've discussed, some, you know, follow-on board meetings to review our plans as they become, you know, move in final draft form. And then, you know, we have a deadline of submitting a plan to the state by July 24th.
Okay. All right.
It isn't.
Well, again, it's pretty good news, assuming that the health data holds.
Yeah. It is an optimistic approach.
The calendar.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm going to just share my screen again here briefly. Again, one of the, as we've been, you know, making our reopening plans, you know, we've talked quite a bit about transitioning to a new learning management system. That's really going to be the backbone of our work around blended learning, which is going to enable us to, you know, hopefully seamlessly transition as necessary between in-person instruction and remote instruction. And so as we've been conversing with teachers and staff across the district, and also trying to contemplate, you know, whatever other reopening and reentry considerations we may need to tangle with, it became evident that there was a strong desire to front load the school year with as much teacher professional learning time as possible. And so we sent you all a draft calendar, and you know, there's not too many changes, but I'll summarize them for you. The biggest change is the proposal to move the student start date from August 24th to August 26th. And then additionally, we're proposing to make that day a half day with an early release, so we could provide our teachers an extra, you know, 2.5, 3 hours of professional learning time on that day. So the way that we were able to carve out those 2 days, we eliminated the professional learning day that was originally proposed to be on October 13th and moved it to the 24th. And so now October 13th is just a regular school day. And then the other proposal is to take the 181st instructional day and convert that to a professional learning day. And that's how we got the 25th.
Yeah.
So those two combined with the addition of a half day here on October 9th leading into the Columbus Day weekend creates, just another opportunity for our staff to really, work on their instructional plans, work on their units of study, collaborate with each other so we can ensure that we are, just delivering really high quality instruction to all of our students. So what that does for us, if you look at the start of the school calendar, it really adds to those 3 days for most staff, 4 days for our new staff, and provides, nearly a full week of days for our teachers to work in this new learning management system. As part of all of that, we've also given very strong consideration to revising how, we use that time. So we will have some, kind of back to school, meet the teacher opportunities in some fashion during that time. I won't be running a traditional convocation in the way that, we usually do. We felt like, we're going to need to give up a number of things in order to provide this additional time for teachers. We're also looking at all of our mandated training. So we have there's a whole slew of activities by state statute that teachers need to engage in. In the past, we've tried to front load that at the start of the school year so we could present it and then kind of, set it aside and focus the rest of our time on some of our instructional priorities. And so we're just looking at that schedule of activities, and whatever we can defer, we're going to defer. And again, try to privilege this professional learning time around, giving teachers the opportunity to work together in Schoology. In terms of, the rest of the calendar, there are really no other substantive changes. So that, as it's written here, the December break remains the same. The February break and the April break each remain the same. And the last day of school is also unchanged. It's the 10th. So let me take this down.
I think it makes sense. And I kind of also, just from another perspective of starting the first week back in the middle of the week and kind of easing back in is probably not such a bad thing either, because it's going to be a long time since kids have been in school, and it's also going to be now under different rules and protocols and procedures. So kind of having like a shorter transition and then a weekend and kind of starting back off again, I don't think is necessarily a bad approach, in addition to giving the teachers the time to get on board with the new technology and other curriculum issues.
Kevin, has the state done anything at all to ease any of their requirements or whatever their mandates in light of all that's going on to help us in this period transition at all? You mentioned earlier, you said there's a state requirement for whatever it was. Are they consider helping us in any way, shape, or form?
That question was put to the commissioner today regarding several different state mandated policies, and response for each of them was that they're having conversations, but they've not made any commitments or decisions, and expect further information in the future. So right now, most of the executive orders that are in place that had done things like waive the 180-day requirement are really, they're in place for this school year only and expire, I think, at the end of the summer. So they'll have to, if they're going to make some of those changes or allow some further relaxation, they're going to have to do that through either new executive orders or, some other field.
I mean, you would know best what they are. I don't. But there's got to be, I'm sure that some things that they require, they expect of us, et cetera, that could make this whole process perhaps a little easier for us if they would just move on them and act on them. But I don't know. Okay.
Right. So what I'm proposing is this is the first time you've had a chance to see this calendar change the proposed change, excuse me. So what I'd like to do is, it's the first time our community's had a chance to take a look at it. I just, earlier today had emailed the proposed calendar to our PTA president. So I think it's appropriate. We'll put it on our website, invite some time for, any additional comment. And then when next we meet, have this as an action item for approval.
Okay, good.
Okay, that makes sense. And you'll also get more guidance from the state and we'll have time to think about it. My traditional complaint is but we're in an extraordinary situation and it's crucial that our teachers get trained. So let's see what the public feedback is from there. Okay, so there are no action items tonight and we don't have a future meeting scheduled yet. I'm leaving that to Kevin to find the next date. It will not be next week, but we probably do need, a meeting or even to July. So that's sort of to be determined. So I'll work with Kevin and get the board out some and see what your availability is. Lucille, are there comments from the public?
No, there are not.
Okay. All right, then we finished the agenda. We don't have any more public comment. So I think we're ready to adjourn. So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.